Hello, I'm Joshua Sparrow at the Brazelton Touchpoints Center, and this is Learning to Listen, Conversations for Change. To find out more about the Brazelton Touchpoints Center and Learning to Listen, just go to brazeltontouchpoints.org and click on the Offerings tab or the Webinars tab. Today, we will be listening to Dr. Hinemoa Elder and learning with her about Indigenous wisdom for children, families, and for living in harmony with our planet. We are so lucky to have Dr. Elder with us today, and you'll soon see and hear why. But first, just a bit of information about today's Learning to Listen episode. Over 3,000 people from around the country and around the world have registered for today's webinar. And we love to see all of your names, what you do and where you are from across the country and around the world. So tell us, as you're already doing, who you are and where you're from in the chat. And so that we can accommodate everyone who would like to join, you can watch today's Learning to Listen on our Facebook page if you are having difficulty viewing the webinar in Zoom. All you have to do is search for the Brazelton Touchpoints Center in Facebook, and you'll see the live stream video will be pinned to the top of our page. Today, our extraordinary interpreter, Maria Jose Gutierrez, will join us from Bogota, Colombia, and she will be simultaneously translating our webinar in Spanish. Thank you so much, Maria Jose. Now, to access the translation in Spanish, just click on the interpretation icon in your Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen. Then select Spanish. To mute English in the background, select Mute Original Audio. La conversación de hoy será en español e inglés. En los controles de esta reunión, haga clic en Interpretación. Haga clic en el idioma que le gustaría escuchar. Para escuchar solo el español, haga clic en silenciar audio original. Now, I know by now most of us are familiar with how Zoom works. Just a reminder to use the chat feature if you have a comment to share or need help with a technical issue. And please do put your questions in the Q&A box, as we will try to pause a few times along the way to respond to them. And if you'd like to receive a certificate of attendance, please be sure you complete the feedback survey. The survey will open in your browser today when this webinar ends, and you will also receive a link to the survey tomorrow in our thank you email to you that will include a link to both that survey and to the recording of this webinar. And you'll also be able to access the recording on the Brazelton Touchpoint Center's YouTube channel and at brazeltontouchpoints.org. Now, before we begin, I want to be sure to thank our sponsor, the Burke Foundation, and our Brazelton Touchpoint Center production team, Ashley Gaddis, Michael Cardy, Suzanne Okasik, Autumn Strasbaugh, and so many others who have made this possible today. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about Dr. Hinemoa Elder, and in just a moment, she will introduce herself, so I will be brief. Dr. Elder is a fellow of the Royal Australia and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists and is a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist working in community and inpatient settings in youth forensic and neuropsychiatry, and has been the Māori strategic leader at Brain Research New Zealand for the last 5 years. She has been a director of Emerge Aotearoa, a national non-governmental organization working to support those with mental health, addictions, and with social housing since 2015. She received the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to Māori and Psychiatry in 2019, and was appointed to the Prime Minister's Science Advisors Cannabis Panel in 2019. Dr. Elder traveled to Antarctica in late 2019 as part of Homeward Bound, a global leadership program for women in science, And she's the chair of the Indigenous Working Group of the International Association of Child and Adolescent Psychiatrists and Allied Professionals. In 2020, Dr. Elder's best-selling book, Aroha, Maori Wisdom for a Contented Life Lived in Harmony with Our Planet, was published by Penguin Random House. In 2021, the book was chosen to be part of the Oprah Winfrey Book Club. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Elder, all the way from Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud.
Te whare atu nei au e karanga mai, te marae tākoto nei karanga. E te iwi he pai nei, te nara koutou katoa. E noho ana au I te roro o tōku whare, ko te reo mihi tērā. Whakarongo rua rāku taringa ki te tai o pārengarenga, e āki ana I te taha o tō mātou waka, ko kura haupo tērā. Ka tītiro whakateraki atu ki muri motu, I hoki mahara au ki tūmatahina me tana mahi, rangatira e ora ai te iwi. E ai ki aia, te kua kamarangaranga, ko tahi manu I tau ki te tahuna, tau atu, tau atu, tau atu. Anei te tahi kuaka e mihi ana ki a koutou katoa. E te waiti, e te waitā, rauranga tira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. Like many of you, I've long appreciated the work of Dr. Brazelton and the Touchpoints Centre. Learning to listen is such a potent part of his legacy, and I'm very proud to provide some reflections on that today from a Māori perspective. Dr. Sparrow asked me to make a short message for Dr. Brazelton's passing in 2018, and so I drew on our Māori traditions of connections with the falling of a mighty tree in the sacred forest of Tāne. And I've been privileged to work alongside Dr. Sparrow at the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Indigenous Committee over the last 10 or more years. And I wanted to thank you, Dr. Sparrow, so much for your collegiality over all these years and for inviting me today. I also want to mihi to our dear colleague, Dr. Rich Livingston from Cherokee Nation, who passed away in late August this year. A wonderful man, an extraordinary specialist child and adolescent psychiatrist, and his legacy lives on in all of us who knew him. And I want to salute our live Spanish translator, Maria Jose Gutierrez. Muchas gracias, señora. So some of you will be Te Reo Māori, Māori language speakers, and will have understood my mihi, my waiata, my singing to you all, but not everyone. So let me explain. Everything you need to know about me was infused in that ancient Māori way of greeting and introducing ourselves in our language, Te Reo Māori. You haven't had much time to learn to listen in Te Reo Māori, our Māori language, so let me break it down for you. What matters and the fundamentals of our true Māori well-being are all in there. And the keys to learning to listen, especially when it comes to our focus on intergenerational whānau, our extended families with our pepe, babies, tamariki, children, and mokopuna, grandchildren. And we call this form of interaction, this introduction and greeting, our pepeha. That's the special Māori word for that, pepeha. So within pepeha are encapsulated the clarity of direction for our journeys in life. Those aspects of our language convey all of that. Iti te kupu, nui te whakaaro. The words may be short, but there's a lot of thought woven in there. Our ways of communicating are embedded with maps for us to learn to listen to our ancestors, to ourselves, and to those that come after. And we greet each other according to how we see our place in the world, not only this current world, but our world across time and space. And of course, I'm coming to you from Thursday morning, and many of you are still in Wednesday. So we have time travel right here in this very moment. Embedded in the greeting too, and in the receiving of the greeting, is the confidence about our collective future, about this place and a time yet to come when our descendants, our tamariki mokopuna, our children and grandchildren of the future, that's the place where they live. So from our ancestors through us and onto those who come after us, this form of greeting weaves our lines of whakapapa, our genealogy, with each other and the universe. So our pepeha, I think of it as our ancestors' portable technology. It locates us in this Indigenous continuum. And it gives us the means to go back and forth across time and space while remaining right here. This Māori time travel is how we identify and how we reaffirm who we are. And at the heart of the journey, if you will, is what we call whakawhanaungatanga, the action of recognizing and strengthening our relationships. And it's actually designed to seek out the connections between us. That is the reciprocity that our pepeha invites. It's the ancient, who are you, who am I, who are we together. This is our meaning of life. This is the basis of everything and everything we are and everything we do. So speaking and listening in Te Reo Māori, we all feel that unique vibration of the language itself, part of the time travel, because when we speak and we listen in our language, we speak the words out loud, or we think them, we dream in them, we open up those connections with our ancestors, and we are listening with more than our ears. We're listening with our hearts, with our skin, with our guts, with our blood. Our reo, our listening in our language opens up those dreams of our old people. And we're learning to listen to their dreams and their plans for us that go back thousands of years. And we feel those vibrations with what we call wairua, the basis of our well-being, our connection with everything in the universe. This is our deep spiritual awareness of being, our intuition, the sense in our gut. It's the deeper listening that's available to us when we really learn to tune in. So I introduced myself by singing first. That's the singing of a salutation to this place that we've created online, and to all of you. I'm greeting each and every one of you. I see you, I see your ancestors. This is what we do as women, where I come from. In the places that I talked about in my waiata, in the song, and in my pepeha, they carry so many stories. Muri Whenua, that's the name of our lands and the name of one of our ancestors from up home in the far north. Te Hiku o Te Ika is another name for that tail of the fish. That's what we call that particular part of Aotearoa, New Zealand. In English, it's called the North Island. It just reminds us that English can be quite dry. And we're taught to use the goddess of the mind. So the mind for us is a female deity. We call her Hinengaro. And she can transport us to the places. When I say the names of those places, I've been taught to actually go there in my mind. So we have that concept available to us. And of course, it allowed me to take you with me with the power of your listening. You came with me in time and space, and we sat on the veranda of one of our wharehui, our meeting houses, and the name of that house is called Te Reo Mihi, the language of greeting. And we sat there together in the roro. The roro is actually another word for the brains at the front of the house. Our meeting houses are shaped as if they are the bodies of our ancestors. and we listened to the waves of the ocean where I'm from, Pārengarenga, lapping against the ancient waka Kurahaupo. And we looked across to a place called Murimotu, and we looked through my ancestors' eyes, Tūmatahina, and we saw the kuaka, the godwits, circling. And we went back to his use of this exquisite observation of those birds to help our people survive. And he said, hey, we're going to be like those godwits. We're going to wait until it's safe, circle around, and when the leadership shows us it's safe, they will land on the sandbank, and then the rest can follow. And so, we went together, didn't we? And we recalled, through the power of listening, that ancient story of survival, of leadership. So that's a real taonga, a real treasure that inspires us up home in Te Heku, in Aotearoa, and now that story lands here. So it really reminds us to explore and listen to our own stories in our own languages, to discover how these stories give us direction for our own well-being, for the well-being of our whānau, our extended families, our pepe, our babies and our children, and all of the young people that we are there to support and nurture. So those are the stories that tell us what hauora, what well-being really looks like. And we have our own migratory journeys, don't we? Just like the kuaka, just like the godwits, flying out around the world, out via Zooms like this. And we return home to ourselves with deeper, more connected experiences of listening to who we can be and why we're here. So that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, actually. So I wrote this book, Aroha, as a psychiatrist, as a child and adolescent psychiatrist, as someone who's had to reclaim my own language as an adult. And one of our revered teachers, a man called Te Wharehuia Milroy, was the one who always taught us about these proverbial sayings, like the one I just shared with you about the godwit. And so that really inspired me, because it brought together those threads of life, the healing journey in my work as a psychiatrist, working with our whānau, with our babies and our children and their parents and other caregivers, and also the language, all of the nuggets of wisdom preserved within these proverbial sayings, the whakatauki and the whakatauaki. So the difference is, we call it a whakatauaki when we know the person who coined that phrase. When we call it a whakatauki, we don't know who the originator was. That's lost in the mists of time. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on too is that the learnings embedded in whakatauki, in a cultural way of learning, really provide a safe cultural space for learning all sorts of things. And we know that how we learn the basics of reading and writing and numeracy is different through a cultural lens too. And we need the places of learning, and all the places where our tamariki mokopuna, our children and grandchildren learn, need to have that cultural identity as the basis to really maximize the opportunities for us to express our full Māori cultural identity. And we've got really good research that shows that for our children that do experience learning in that way, they do extremely well. And for the children who have their access to that kind of learning limited in some way, the outcomes are not as good. I've spent my career in medicine, health research, health services development and governance, working to create and maintain and grow space and time to make things safe for us to be Māori, safe to wānanga, to have these sorts of meetings in our own language, to listen and to learn. And I suppose the book is another way to do that, because this is a space and a place to learn and listen, which is very portable. We can take it with us wherever we want to go. And of course, there's ebooks and audio books as well. So there are many challenges to all of our cultures in different ways, but particularly to Indigenous cultures, in terms of reclaiming and relearning our language and being Māori. And so learning to listen to our ancestors and feeling that grief and loss too means it's a very emotional journey, and there's a shedding of those emotional layers back through our genealogical strata all of those people that we sort of carry with us wherever we go. But despite those barriers, we continue to navigate this migration home to our identity, to support those identities for our babies and our young people. And so I thought I'd just end this section of the kōrero and move into hopefully some questions and discussion with a whakatauki from the book. And I thought, because of Dr. Brazelton and remembering him as a great tree from the forest of Tāne, I would share this one from the book. It goes like this. Aha kua whati te manga, e takoto ana anō te kōhiwi. Although the branch is broken off, the trunk remains. So this really speaks to us of the longevity of the ideas and the work that Dr. Brazelton and others have created that stands firm. And all of us are sort of branches to those bigger kaupapa, those bigger ideas and bigger aspirations for the flourishing of our whānau, of our extended families. And in particular, I suppose we're focusing today on our real young ones, our pepi and our tamariki. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I'll just pause there and see if we have some pātai, some questions and kōrero. Kia ora.
Thank you, Hinemoa. There are so many comments about how beautiful this is. And we do have people from all over the world, from New Zealand, Aotearoa, from Brazil, and I can't quite track them all. There was one comment from someone in the US, perhaps on sovereign tribal nation land, who said, we have something in common. I greet with song as well. And one of the things that I thought maybe you might say a little bit more about, if you're okay, and with it, and it is personal, but you don't have to answer it at the personal level, but there are these ways in which colonization disrupts access to and knowledge about the pepeha, the way we think about ourselves and how we use it to connect with each other. You mentioned that you speak Maori in ways that sound so beautiful to me, who is a non-speaker. It's so, I'm wondering, how do you find your way back to the language? And I imagine there's no one single or right way to find one's way to the wisdom of the culture and the language, and there are many different paths. But I wondered if you talk a little bit about some of those challenges and the ways through those challenges, given the disruption of by colonization of these strains and this wisdom.
Oh, kia ora. He pātai rangatira, as we say. That's a really important question. And I'm sure that's something that many of the people watching and listening can relate to from many perspectives. And equally within Te Ao Māori, within Māori communities, there's so many different experiences of how the language was taken away from different whānau groups, from different communities. And so for us, in my whānau, my mother, my grandfather's generations, they were beaten for speaking Te Reo. And so there was a lot of pain and a lot of anguish. I'm just going to put my headphones on so that it's perhaps clearer what I'm talking about. Because there's all sorts of other things going on in my house as well at the moment. So, just want to make sure that we're focused on what's happening here. So what I realized as a younger person going to medical school was how important it was for me to speak our language, and that without that I was really not able to work with our whānau who were needing medical care, our patients and their wider families. So many of our people do prefer to speak and to share what they're experiencing in our language. And actually we have a lot of different words, of course, different experiences and expressions of emotion, which are really, really important in the practice of psychiatry.
So it was really clear to me that I was going to need to upskill. And of course, medical school is really grueling, and there wasn't a lot of time to add that in. Although we had our own ropu, our group of Māori medical students, and we banded together, were very supportive and tight knit, and we had many experiences in different cultural spaces. So that supported us to hold fast to our cultural identity through that grueling process of medical training. And then I was really determined once I came through medical school and was a junior doctor that I had to try to find ways to build my reo. And so I became, was constantly scanning the environment for opportunities. And we do have total immersion opportunities, week or so at a time, that usually happen during the school holidays, because we have this total immersion education system now, which has been going for about 30 years. So we teach babies from the age of 2, or from the womb, actually, from the womb all the way through into, we have Māori universities. We call them whare wānanga. So I was very opportunistic and went to some of these, started going to these total immersion weeks. And of course, at the beginning, I was pretty ignorant. I knew very, very little. And some of my relations with the teachers, and they were very helpful and supportive. And there are so many emotional layers that peel away in the grief. It's different to learning French or German, the languages that many of us have learnt in school. When it's the process of reclaiming your own language, it's really different. And we have a lot of conversations about that here, about how for some people it can feel very hard because you have to try and take time off work or find the money to pay for these things, when really they should be more available. So it's a really personal journey. I've been very determined and dogged with it. And I suppose one of the key things that I've found is that our teachers, and I speak a lot about this in the Aroha book, our teachers of Te Reo Māori are extraordinary people. They are so committed to the survival of our language, because of course this is not a sort of a luxury nice to have. This is about the potential loss of the language. And the question is, of course, if we lose our language, then who really are we? So there's a lot of debate about how we continue to promote and normalise Te Reo Māori, and whether it should be something that is absolutely offered in all schools to a certain level. The language is really sensitive, for some people, talking about a subject like Te Reo being compulsory in schools, in the school system for all children who live in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That's quite a hot subject for some people. We don't even teach the history of our country in schools yet. So we're, sometimes when I go to international Indigenous events, and I was lucky enough to recently go to one called Te Aratini at the World Expo in Dubai, Māori are often looked on as, wow, you guys have got this so sorted out, and you're really onto it, and yet for us internally it doesn't always feel like that. So a kind of a long-winded answer to your question, Dr. Sparrow.
Oh, thank you. There was a comment in the chat that says, your words bring tears to my eyes, so much loss, so much pain. And I just wanted to bring that back to what you said, because you mentioned grief, and perhaps you commented on this, and it is personal, but it's in your book. So I hope it's okay to say that you talk about losing your mother in the book, and it's very moving. And you talk about how she never learned Te Reo Māori because she grew up in a generation where there were all kinds of ways in which colonization interfered with that, or actually punished for that. And so I think that with the grief and the loss, you were also this branch growing out of the trunk, and or maybe completing this circle for you and for her and your people, so that in the grief there's also this rebirth. So there are a couple of other comments also about the difficulties. One is, it's so difficult to think about feeling close to our ancestors in our language when having to leave one's own country to adopt a new language, which is the case for so many people in the United States. So again, that was why I wanted to come back to what you said about grief, and maybe where your own process and your book have also been so much about healing.
And I suppose one of the things that we are all in some way interested in the well-being of our youngest members of our whānau, our babies, our children, our grandchildren, and many of the people on the call will be working alongside those whānau. And so I suppose what's really important to me too is that we remember all those intergenerational stories and the grief that may not be apparent when we meet people for the first time, or through processes of let's call it therapy, that in fact tuning in and I think listening to a deeper historical song, a different historical vibration that we can listen to as those bearing witness and trying to make sense alongside these whānau that we work with as to how to create a shared culturally meaningful understanding of all the layers of what's going on, and understanding that all of that comes into the room with these families that we're working with is a really important factor. One of the things that I've certainly advocated strongly for with the training of psychiatrists in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and in Australia, we have a binational college, and I know that we've done that a lot through the American Academy, haven't we, Dr. Sparrow, is to really speak up for this special kind of cultural listening, this historical, cultural tuning into all those different ways that grief can manifest through different generations.
Well, would you like to tell us more about listening from your perspective, from the Maori perspective?
Absolutely. So one of the things I did want to share was that the word rongo is the word to hear, but it's a verb. And it's also the word for taste, for smell, for perceive. It's used for all the senses actually, except for vision and sight. It's used to indicate the sense literally of perception and of awareness. And so when we talk about rongo, whakarongo, and you'll notice I've added that prefix whaka to the whakarongo, it means the act of hearing, the act of listening and smelling and tasting and feeling. So I think it's really it's fascinating to just sit with the idea that listening for my culture is not really only about the ears. The other thing that's really fascinating is that rongo, with a capital R, is the name of one of our gods, is the name of one of our deities, one of the children of Papatūānuku, our Earth Mother, and Ranginui, our Sky Father. So rongo, he's got a few other longer versions of his name, rongo matane, rongo marairoa. So rongo, as we know him, that's his nickname, if you like. He is the sacred entity, and he's also the god of peace. And so when we go inside the marae and we're listening and speaking and sharing in quite a formal way, he has us in his care. So we can have really robust discussions, don't get me wrong, we can get heated inside that space, but we are nested within the bonds of rongo. And so when we use these words, we're talking about a whole lot of stuff, not just something that goes on with the ears and that function. And I love to reflect on that. And I say to our mātu, our parents that I work with, and our caregivers, you know, we're not just listening with the ears, we're not just listening for words, we're listening for feelings, we're listening for emotions, we're listening for that wairua, that vibe that I talked about earlier on, that connectivity with all the things in the universe. We're listening with that. That spiritual listening. And so I think that that's really cultural listening, as I mentioned before, is infused with Aroha, the title of the book, and one of the words that's really literally at the heart of our culture. So Aroha can be translated as love, and in all its forms. It's a fierce protector, it's compassion, it's empathy, it's sympathy. It's a really broad term for us, the concept of aroha. So we're listening with aroha, we're listening with wairua, we're listening with our blood, as I said earlier on. We're listening, we're tuning in with our whole being to what's going on with the whānau that we're working with, the communities that we're working with. And so I thought one whakatauki from the book, actually a whakatauaki from the book, from one of the women who's really mentored me throughout my career, a wonderful woman called Moi Milne, who comes from Matawaia in Te Tokerau in the north. She said this: "Ka tū tonu koe I roto I te aroha." Literally, keep standing in the love. Be the manifestation of that aroha. Manifest those loving ears, and see what happens. So I use that way of thinking about rongo and whakarongo and wairua and aroha in my clinical practice every day.
Well, we've got a number of questions about people in practice, and several of them are actually from New Zealand. And I'm so glad that folks from New Zealand are joining us. So I want to be sure to share a couple of those with you. Mm-hmm. I will not know how to pronounce the words in Maori, so you'll have to forgive me. This is so wonderful to listen to our kōrero this morning. Mm-hmm. How would you suggest that health professionals, tautoko, support our whānau, and whānau is extended family, the whānau we work with, to find their way back to their own tangata whenua, which is, I think, their homeland, mm-hmm. when in fact they've been urbanized, and mm-hmm. being urbanized doesn't really work for them. And mm-hmm. This actually is a really nice way of connecting to, I think, what we've saved for the last part of our conversation together. Mm. This question also specifically asks about how to do that work in the context of people who are unhoused or who are struggling with mental health challenges. Mm.
He rawe tira. That's so many things involved in that kōrero around living away from your traditional lands, your rohe, your whenua, where you hail from. And many of us do live in cities, and that was part of what happened to our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, this moving to cities for work and a sense of disconnection, and all whānau are at different points on that kind of continuum. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. I think that any work that's done with the whānau needs to be really tailored to their experiences. And in general, I think there are some principles of support. So I work with a lot of people across that dimension, and some, of course, because we're psychiatrists, we tend to see people who are struggling the most. And so some of those people are struggling with being in trouble with the law, maybe not having a place to stay, or having access to regular food or supports. So one of the things that we do try to offer whenever I come across a young person who's sort of at the what we might call, high level of need, but also high level of potential. I really emphasize that because a lot of our people who are struggling do tend to attract quite a nihilistic gaze, that it's all a bit too hard, and I reject that absolutely. Um, there are always ways to help discover where the healing might begin and how we can foster that. So I know that through the Kōti Rangatahi, the Māori youth court that we have on marae, certainly I've seen really good evidence that when we use pepeha, which are portable, this way of saying, hey, how do we reconnect you with your Māori identity? And that's a challenging conversation, don't get me wrong. A lot of our people at all sorts of ages and stages don't feel entitled. They are feeling that colonization very, very personally, although they might not call it that. I've had many of our rangatahi, our teenagers, say to me, "Oh, Doc, I'm a bit of a plastic Māori. I don't know where I'm from. I can't speak Te Reo. Don't really know anything about my pepeha, my whakapapa." And I'm like, that's all good. That's all good. We know where we're starting, where we're starting from. And so it's about recognizing where people are at, and also being mindful not to add to the shame that they might be feeling. So we have a special word for that. It's called whakamā. And of course, we don't want to be adding any layers unwittingly of kind of further colonizing our own people. We also know what that's called. That's called lateral violence. So we have to be very mindful of navigating and charting this course with delicacy and with a recognition of the mana of the other person and their whānau. So mana is a word we use to recognize the status, if you like, that they are their own person, they are their own whānau, and it's not for me or anyone else to come in and kind of tell them how to be Māori. The way I think about it is there's no wrong way to be Māori. It's just some of us just have not had the access to those elements of kind of reclaiming who we are at a very personal level in order to discover more about that. So I hear what the person's saying about, how do we help people who live in cities or who feel disenfranchised? That's the work that we're doing in Aotearoa all the time, because we're all colonized. As one of our esteemed leaders, activists and artists, Tamiiti, and those of you from tuning in from Aotearoa know who I'm talking about, a wonderful leader, and he's very clear. We're all colonized, and we're all working our way through that. So we've got to recognize that we don't become weaponized against our own people.
So sometimes that's referred to as the circular firing squad.
Yeah.
So there was a comment in response to the one I brought to you earlier, #landback, to address the housing insecurity and supporting community-based land trusts and living spaces so that we have space to do this cultural wellness and healing work.
Absolutely. And so we're all in our different parts of Aotearoa working to get our land back. And it's a very, very difficult journey, and it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of effort over many generations. And many of our old people have passed on without seeing the land being returned. So some people have got some of their land back and have established what we call papakainga, or re-establish papakainga. These are communal living environments which are often set up where back in the day our ancestors lived and lived in harmony with Papatūānuku, our Earth Mother, with Tangaroa, Hinemoa, the deities of the ocean. And so we are, bit by bit, doing the best we can to re-establish those ways of living, which are very harmonious and very good for our pepe, for our tamariki, for our young ones, and for our parents. So, but this is by no means sorted out at this stage.
So the knowledge and wisdom and culture are all embedded in the land and the sky and the ocean, and many of the whakataue and whakataaoi that you give us in your book, of 52 of them, actually refer to the birds, trees, the ocean. And in what you've said so far, I think we've been hearing about how understanding who we are and helping children understand who they are and where they come from and what makes them strong, what gives them strength, comes from their culture, which lives in the land, which is, I think, part of why this comment came up. And that then, I think, raises the question that you devote a whole section of your book to, which is, what does Maori wisdom tell us about the situation that our planet is in as well? Because if wisdom and culture live in the land and the sea and the sky, or survival lives in the survival of the planet.
That's absolutely at the core of who we are, this kaitiakitanga role, this guardianship role. And so this has been dismantled quite deliberately through colonization, and reclaiming that, I think, is at the heart of our hauora, our well-being, and learning opportunities for our babies and our young ones to really grow up within the fullness of that intimate relationship. I mean, we talk about, ko te awa, ko au te awa, I am the river is me. We have a river and a mountain range. They now have, in legal terms, personal status. So we're beginning to have recognition at the level of the Crown that we have a different relationship with the land and all the natural world, and we're affected by that. So when we're removed from that, when we're over generations have lost that intimate connection, that's been a part of our unwellness. It makes us vulnerable to mental illness and dis-ease. And we know that when we get more involved, particularly if you think of it, the areas within our pepe half, we go back to those mountains, those rivers, those lakes, those oceans, those places, those landscapes. That's a very tangible part of what makes us feel well. And when we nurture those areas and we have our learning of things, the basics of reading and writing and arithmetic, when we have those learnings in those places, there is that incredible cultural salience and sense of wellness that is just so potent. So the reciprocal relationship, which is just part of who we are, is embedded in so much of the kōrero in the book. I suppose I did want to just maybe read one small section which illustrates something about this, something important about this. So one of the things I wrote was nurturing people according to nature's inherent instructions was natural for our ancestors. I've been told that back in the day, the elders would watch the children and observe their inherent traits. Some were more confident by the water, with a knack for fishing, others rather quiet, preferring their own company in the dense silence of the forest, or sitting beside their grandparents listening to stories. Others with beautiful singing voices and elegant movements. All the children would be nurtured according to their strengths, the quiet ones perhaps becoming carvers, the ones in tune with the sea being taught more about navigation, fishing and diving, the quick wits and good singers valued for their ability to entertain. So I think that just illustrates a whole lot of knowledge about nurturing our pepe, our tamariki mokopuna, that we're really beginning to reclaim now. And when we live in papakainga, and even when we live in cities, we can find ways to maximize opportunities for that, and to see through things through the eyes of our ancestors, and to listen with the ancestral ears and hearts and minds. And maybe that brings me to one of the last things I wanted to share, which is a little bit more about this female deity of the mind that we call Hinemoa, because I think she's also a big part of what's being reclaimed for us at the moment, and other people might find this thought-provoking. So yeah, we have this idea of Hinemoa. She's a woman, female, takes care of our minds, and in the classification system where I'm from, in Te Tokero, we have an ancient classification system of mind, and one of the rua, one of the storage areas, the specialized areas of mind, is called Rua Matua Takitaki o Tāne, the specialized area of the mind for parenting. And I think that's fascinating that, you know, our tupuna, our old people, recognize that there's a special part of our minds that we need to grow and nurture, but that it's already there. It's already part of all the taonga, all the gifts that we have been passed on. And so within that storage area, that rua of mind, is this idea that I feel very clear, this idea that children are ancestors of the future. And I often use this in clinical practice to help sort of unmask and get to the real, what we call the ngako, actually the fat for us is the kernel, the ngako of the issue, which is that when we approach our tamariki mokopuna, when we approach our children, our grandchildren, with the idea that they are ancestors of the future, we actually treat them quite differently. So maybe that's a final thought-provoking thought. And just to let people know that at the end of the book, I do invite you all to write your own whakatauaki. One of the things that Whaia Moi Milne encouraged all of us to do over many years is to not let it just be an ancient thing that our old people did. We can write whakatauaki, our own proverbial sayings for contemporary life. And so I've given a few pointers as to how you might use the simple letters of the word Aroha to draw you into a safe space to write your own proverbs to help you navigate some of the difficulties around our relationship with our planet, reclaiming that kaitaki role, and bringing all the health benefits forward from strengthening our relationship with our Mother Earth. Kia ora.
There are lots of very appreciative comments in the chat. I know you're not able to track them all. I wanted to share a couple of them with you. One of them says Megwich, which is thank you in Ojibwe Megwich to our creators, our ancestral spirit, reconnecting through our native being, our language gifts that teaches us who we are. There's another comment appreciating something you said a little earlier. I love the focus on where we can start versus where we get stuck. Change requires us to be visionary, brave, and purposeful in our journey to strengthen our communities. Movement forward is so necessary to keep our spirits up and celebrate our collective ideas and processes. And you are so good at doing exactly that. I wondered if you could talk a little bit, and I hadn't prepared you for this question, Hinemoa, so forgive me, but I love your book, and I've been really curious about how you got the idea for it and how you went about doing, because there are 52 of these whakataue and whakata'aoi, which I said totally wrong, one for each week. And they come some from, as you said, the shrouded mists, we don't know who, and some of them have authors that are known. So I'd love to hear how you came to them and made your own sense of them, because I think that is part of your way of being visionary, brave, and purposeful, and moving us all forward.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you. I'm not sure I see myself like that. I feel like the conduit. I feel like the conduit of a whole lot of ancient wise material that really has helped me. And so I wanted to share that with as many people who would read or listen, on the off chance that a few people might find it helpful too. And so as I said, I was very privileged to be one of the students and to still be a student of Te Reo, and at that time to be taught by Te Wharehuia Milroy. And he said to us, you need to go out there and be puanani. You need to be the seeds of the dandelion clock blown by the wind and go out into the world and celebrate our reo and our culture and share it. And it really, the urgency of our teachers was really tangible and palpable to me, to accelerate in whatever way we could access for our own people and for the world to this wisdom and this healing. And so that was really the impetus for me. And so from the mid 2000s, I was really almost I was fixated. I was going to say obsessional, but not to use technical jargon. I was really keen on and found so much that helped me in my own personal life within these whakatauki and whakatauaki, and it helped me to stop and look at nature and take that moment, because like many of us, I got caught up in this, hiding in my job, in the cave of work, being busy all the time. There's a lot of need out there. There's this very small group of us Māori psychiatrists. I'm the only one that is Māori speaking Te Reo in child and adolescent psychiatry. So I can stay very busy all the time. And I noticed that when I use these different whakatauaki, it really helped me personally. So I was lucky that I was sort of part of that continuum of listening and learning and really listening to what Te Wharehuia and the other teachers were trying to tell us all, which is, we've got to get cracking, we've got to get moving, we've got to really accelerate access for our own people, of decolonizing our minds, of re-indigenizing our minds and our whānau and our babies and our children, because we are at the precipice of losing our language and of losing this central heart of who we are as Māori. So I really heard that call at a deep, deep level of my wairua.
And we are so glad that you did. And we are so glad that you heard that call and are so grateful for your being this conduit of wisdom and for your generosity. One of the beautiful, moving things about your book is the way you really share how these whakatau have been healing for you. And so there's also enormous generosity there, as well as in that of your teacher and the dandelion seeds with the plumes to share and spread the wisdom far and wide. So I want to thank you again for giving us this gift in your book and the gift of your time and wisdom today. And to thank everyone around the world for being with us for this hour. And I know that we will work together again, Hinemoa. Thank you. I'm now going to just quickly share with everyone what we have coming up for you. On January 26th, we have our National Substance Use Disorder Summit. We have Touchpoints trainings coming up. One is for librarians using Touchpoints. We also have one for mental health clinicians. We have some webinars that are designed to support everyone's mental health and well-being coming up. And then we've got some workshops on making conversations that we might enter into feeling daunted or even dreading into productive ones that strengthen and deepen our relationships with those we work with. And finally, I want to encourage you to mark your calendars now for our virtual national forum on March 29th, 30th, and 31st. And it will be all about the importance of and how to promote the flourishing of children's positive racial, ethnic, and cultural identities. So once again, thank you so much, Hinemoa, for writing this beautiful book, for sharing your wisdom and your being and presence with us today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Bye-bye.